Matt and I have been classmates since high school. Despite our lack of academic abilities, we were not deprived of intelligence. As teenagers, we began to communicate and came to understand that we did not want to burden ourselves with unbearable debts for a traditional college education. Instead, we saw the potential for a successful career in the craft. Plumbers were in great demand, and fortunately, Matt's uncle turned out to be an experienced plumber. Thanks to his experience and willingness to take on apprentices, we saw an opportunity to master the profession and earn a decent living without requiring formal education. Matt's uncle, being older and more experienced, was happy to share his knowledge with us, giving us the opportunity to gain valuable skills in this area. After reaching a certain age, he wisely saved money, which made retirement practically possible. He dreamed of moving to Florida, where the warm climate would be more favorable for his sore joints during the winter months. Matt imagined how he, or both of us, would take over the management of the family business and expand it. We both started as apprentices with his uncle Steve, earning the minimum wage but gaining the necessary experience and knowledge. However, before our plans could come to fruition, we had to overcome the difficulties and obstacles associated with adulthood. After going through the turbulent years of adolescence, we learned not only about life and love but also about the complexities of relationships with both male and female friends. We learn what makes people become and remain our friends. It's not just about being good company or showing dedication, but about everything else. At school, we formed a tight-knit group where we always had each other's backs. Others quickly realized that if they took on one of us, they took on all of us. Even though we weren't the biggest guys, we were physically strong because of our sports, and each of us was involved in fights. What made people want to be around us was our unwavering dedication, our ability to make each other laugh, and our willingness to stand up for what we believed in. We valued authenticity, trust, and the connection that came from shared experiences and challenges. Going through all the ups and downs of adolescence, we stuck together, forming friendships that will last a lifetime. Our friendship was forever cemented one day when I found myself in a difficult situation with two frightening football players. Matt attacked them, hit them, and before we knew it, we knocked them to the ground together. From that moment on, we became inseparable. When it came to girls, Matt was a bit of a ladies' man, always with different girls in his arms. As for me, I'm Jim, and I fell in love with Kate the very first year after graduation. I was moonlighting as a plumber for my Uncle Steve when I first met Kate at a bar. We instantly found a common language and spent a significant amount of time together, discovering a strong bond both emotionally and physically. When our relationship moved into the bedroom, it became clear that we were suitable for each other in all respects. Matt, who was a close friend of mine, began to feel deprived but was sympathetic to my happiness with Kate. He even mentioned that if I hadn't been courting her, he would have been interested in a relationship with her himself. Despite the initial awkwardness, the three of us found a way to get along harmoniously. In society, we were like a close-knit family. Kate and Matt often exchanged warm hugs, which seemed completely natural to me. After all, they were just friends. Over time, Uncle Steve decided to retire and transferred his business to Matt and me, after which he moved to Florida. My parents helped me get a loan to buy out Steve's business, and Matt's parents gave him the necessary amount, thus the debt was left only to me. 2 years ago, I tied the knot with Kate, and life took off. Our marriage was going well, and our business was booming as we focused on expanding it through advertising and social media. Thanks to the recommendations of past clients, we soon found ourselves so overwhelmed with work that we could barely cope. Hiring additional staff was one option, but finding qualified plumbers at affordable prices was not easy, so we started working more hours to meet the demand. At that time, Kate was working as a clerk in a law office, receiving a decent salary. She was unhappy with her job, and she had to deal with a nasty lawyer who showed her unwanted attention, but she quickly stopped him. Despite this, she said she was happy about the prospect of starting a family, but I didn't know when it would happen yet. Financially, we were coping with my salary, but losing her income would not be ideal. As I worked more and more hours, the idea of starting a family seemed more and more distant. Kate began to drift away, and I began to worry about her mental health. I reassured her that everything would get better over time. We hoped that bright days were ahead of us, but despite this, her unhappiness continued. Then, as if by magic, a change occurred. Kate's smile returned, and the tension dissipated. I couldn't help but wonder what caused this change, but in the end, I was just grateful that my wife was happy again. Our stagnant intimate life suddenly came to life. Kate looked lively and wanted intimacy almost daily. Who could complain about this? But one day, I felt out of place, nothing serious, just a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Suddenly, she began to show more and more interest in strange intimate hobbies, which intrigued me but also caused alarm because it was not in her nature. A few weeks later, feeling the need to confide in someone, I turned to my best friend Matt. We met at our usual place, got a couple of beers, and settled into a booth at the back of the bar. "What's bothering you, buddy?" Matt asked, noticing how my behavior had changed lately. "I was waiting for you to open up to me." "I didn't want to push," he added. "I hope it's nothing serious, but it's because of Kate." "I feel depressed," I replied. She used to hate her job, and at work, she was molested by a nasty lawyer. Then, about 6 weeks ago, she changed. Suddenly, she became incredibly happy, and 2 weeks later, she was already trying to seduce me at every opportunity, I shared. Matt grinned and asked, "What's wrong with having a happy wife who wants to have some fun?" But after a few weeks, I noticed that she likes new, strange things in the bedroom, something she hadn't shown interest in before. I wondered where she learned these tricks. Maybe she took them over from someone else, I kept thinking. Matt made a remark that caught my attention. He quickly realized his mistake and tried to hide it with a dispassionate, "It's okay, Jim." We spent several hours drinking beer together, but now I was plagued by 2 nagging thoughts. The next morning, I told Kate that I had a busy day ahead of me. "I'm informing you that I won't be home most of the day, so feel free to invite your lover while I'm gone." Kate's expression was one of complete shock, and she was speechless. "A guy who likes your new hobbies in bed? Do you want to share the details about him?" I asked sarcastically. With tears streaming down her face, she rushed into the bedroom. I headed for my truck, knowing that the upcoming case could not wait. I tricked her by pretending to work all day but actually planned to finish by lunch. On the way home, I noticed a familiar truck parked at the entrance. When I went inside, I saw an unexpected sight. Fortunately, they were not lying in bed but on opposite sides of the sofa with a box of napkins between them. About 40 used napkins were scattered on the floor in front of the sofa. When I entered the room, Matt stood up to greet me. Without thinking, I hit him in the face, causing him to fall to the floor, and blood flowed from his nose and mouth. "There is no need to apologize, my dear friend. She's your problem now," I told him. Turning to Kate, I ordered her to pack up and leave, calling her A and expressing my contempt for her infidelity. When she started to answer, I left, not wanting to look at her lying face anymore. I yelled at her, expressing my displeasure with her lies. I warned her not to talk, threatening that otherwise I would harm her lover. At that moment, I was in a destructive mood and told her to pack her things and leave. I informed her that she could pick up the remaining items when she was ready, or I would have them packed in boxes and left at the office. I was sure that her lover would bring them to her house. A moment later, she appeared with a bag, and Matt was sitting on the couch dealing with his injuries. I demanded that they both leave my house immediately and threatened legal action. Within the next week, I kept the door open because Kate couldn't bring herself to look at me. Matt, on the other hand, tried to speak, but I quickly silenced him by punching him in the stomach. After understanding my message, they both left the house and drove away in Matt's car. The rest of the day was spent studying the divorce process, which turned out to be simple in our situation. However, the liquidation of the company turned out to be more difficult since I was the only holder of the debt associated with it. Having made the decision to resolve both issues, I made an appointment with a divorce lawyer through Jurist Online, hoping to solve everything in one fell swoop. After meeting with Karen King, a divorce lawyer, I began to navigate the complex process of divorce and financial settlement with the company. I had a difficult path ahead of me, but thanks to Karen's experience and guidance, I had a glimmer of hope that everything would go more smoothly from now on. Before starting work, I asked what steps should be taken to end a partnership with a man who was my wife's lover. She informed me that she would involve her husband, Carl, in the discussion since he specializes in corporate law and both situations are linked due to the participation of the same person. Although the divorce process was simple with cohabitation and separate financing of our cars, the absence of children simplified the situation. In 9 cases out of 10, the difficulty arose because of our business partnership. Before my marriage to Kate, she signed a prenuptial agreement in which the business was recognized as extramarital property. Initially, this idea came from Matt, who wanted to protect the business in case something went wrong between Kate and me. But now that the marriage had broken up, my business partner was inadvertently involved in it, and there was no way we could remain partners. The problem was that I still owed a significant amount of money on the loan I took out to buy my share in the business. I had a copy of my business agreement with Matt, which spelled out our partnership when we moved from Steve to the company. Carl found the liquidation process simple and uncomplicated. He expressed my desire to simply get out of the game and offered several options. Jim, you have a choice to sell your stake in the business without a specific buyer. Do you want the business to continue to flourish, or would you prefer it to suffer? If your goal is to ensure its success, consider selling to Matt at a high price. If you want to harm the business, Carl began to reason, it is likely that a larger company will acquire your half and then liquidate the business, absorbing it into its activities. Unfortunately, this will lead to your employees suffering, Carl suggested. Now we have 5 employees. They are all good guys, and I care about their well-being, I said. The alternative would be to just walk away from the situation, not service the debt, and let the business collapse, Carl said. But I can't bring myself to do that, especially when it comes to my employees. I want to disappear and leave all this nonsense behind. My parents are on the hook for this loan, and I can't do this to them. The problem is that Matt knows about it and can use it against me, I said. We concluded the meeting, and in 2 days, Kate would receive the divorce papers at her workplace to maximize her humiliation. Matt would be notified of my intention to terminate the business partnership within 30 days, and within 2 days, he would be asked to make a buyout offer. All I could do now was sit and wait. For the next few days, I decided to skip work and started getting calls from Matt, which I preferred to ignore. Then he wrote me a letter reminding me that we had a business to manage, but I didn't care. There was a lot of work, clients were upset about missed appointments, but I continued to ignore all this. I was done with the business and just wanted to leave. The next day, my phone was flooded with messages from Kate's accusations to Matt's questions about what was going on. In response, I just sent them a photo of my middle finger held up defiantly. Kate had been avoiding me since Saturday, realizing that I had a deep dislike for her. Our marriage was ruined, tainted by a betrayal that pierced it deeper than any other. It was not only my wife who betrayed me but also my oldest friend and business partner. The night they showed up at my house, they made another mistake. Kate used her key to enter the house, and I lost control of myself. I rushed at them, hitting Matt blow by blow despite his pleas to stop. He didn't resist, instead encouraging me to talk. "Please, Jim, we need to talk," he pleaded. I hit him hard in the mouth with my right again, drawing blood. The sound of a tooth breaking was almost pleasant. Kate's screams pierced the air, begging me to stop. "Please, Jim, we need to talk," she begged. I met her cold gaze and declared that this scoundrel had no place in my house under any circumstances. I added that she had at least some right to be here, but that right was quickly disappearing. I demanded that she give me the key to my house because by contacting my former best friend, she lost the right to come and go as she pleased. "Now get out of here, both of you, before I do something I'll regret later," I warned, feeling anger boil inside me. "Kate, if you want to talk to me, please contact my lawyer and arrange a meeting at her office. I'm not going to meet you here or in front of the person you're talking to right now. Please leave me alone," I said to my wife and then turned to Matt. "Matt, I'll be at the office tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning. We will discuss everything in the presence of our staff." I decided to sell my stake in the business to the highest bidder as Cooper's Plumbing has shown interest in this offer. Despite his anger, I repeated that he should leave immediately. I grabbed the key from Kate and closed the door behind them. If they didn't understand the extent of my rage before, they certainly did now. My goal was to crush them both, and I didn't hold back. In the divorce papers, I made sure to indicate adultery, not because it was of legal importance, but to humiliate Kate. I wanted everyone, our friends, family, and colleagues, to know that she was an insidious liar. Driven by anger, I updated my Facebook status and shared a scathing post. I am here to inform you all that my marriage to Kate is coming to an end as a result of her affair with my business partner Matt. This betrayal shocked me. I did not expect such a deception from two people I trusted. I made the decision to break up with Kate and asked her to leave my house. I also made it clear that neither she nor Matt would be welcome in my life in the future. The divorce process and the sale of my stake in the plumbing company will take place as soon as possible. If someone wants to continue to be my friend and not my girlfriend, please do me a favor and don't mention their names in my presence. Now they mean nothing to me. I concluded the post with this message. Throughout the day, my Facebook and phone were constantly filled with messages. I only answered one call from my father-in-law. James, I've been informed of the situation. It looks serious, son. Is there anything I can do to help? He asked. James, I appreciate your concern, but unfortunately, there is no way to solve this problem, I replied. You can help her by convincing her to finish the divorce paperwork and see the case through. Jim, she came in tonight and she's upset. She admits that she felt depressed and made a stupid mistake with your friend Matt. She swears that she only needs you. Could you talk to her? My father-in-law asked. Not today, James. She knows that I will only communicate with her through my lawyer. There's no way to fix this. I will never forgive either of them. If possible, I would prefer never to meet them again. I'm sorry, but that's the reality, James, I replied. I want to express my gratitude to you and Martha for always treating me with kindness. I'm sad that everything turned out this way. Goodbye for now, I said bitterly. The next morning at 8 o'clock, I gathered everyone in the office. It seemed important to me that they were aware of what was happening and how it could affect the company. Matt stopped talking when I started. I have some sad news that I have to share. My wife cheated on me, and the man you see at this table is the one she's been dating for the last 2 months. If anyone present knew about this, there will be consequences. A difficult decision has been made. In case you didn't know, I'm currently selling my stake in the business. I have doubts that the current owner will be able to meet the requested price, so I contacted Cooper's Plumbing, which expressed interest in buying out. If they make a purchase, there is a chance that they will decide to close the business. Some of you may be offered jobs, but there are no guarantees. I apologize for the inconvenience, but I have financial obligations that I have to fulfill, and I cannot continue to do business with a lying man like Matt, who was once my closest friend. I need to get rid of this debt and start my life with a clean slate somewhere else. Obviously, staying here is not an option now. If you'll excuse me, I need to talk to this person to determine our next steps. I'm sorry. You're all good people. I hope that you will succeed, but if you have the opportunity to find another job, I advise you to use it. I finished the meeting. When everyone left the office, Matt exploded. Jim, was it really necessary to escalate the situation so much? I'm sure we can find a solution. Kate doesn't need me, she loves you. And to be honest, I don't want Kate either. I'm not one to settle down. You should forget about it and focus on your marriage and starting a business. I understand your contempt for the Coopers, but selling to them is not an option, Matt said. I grinned, admitting that my dislike of Coopers was nothing compared to my feelings for him. The clock is ticking. There are only 24 or 25 days left. Rest assured, I'll sell to Coopers and hope they close you down. You won't have a single day of respite. If you haven't started looking for funding yet, then you're even dumber than I thought, I said. And one last thing, treat Kate right, otherwise you will face serious consequences. Do you understand? I may not care about her, but you chose to be with her, so get over it, or I'll kill you one dark quiet night when you least expect it. I finished as I headed for the door. He begged again, please, Jim, I can't live without you. When I got home, I saw a message from my lawyer saying that Kate wanted to meet the next day. She planned to take her father and her lawyer with her, who turned out to be the same vile snake from the office who repeatedly showed her signs of attention. It seemed that Kate had fallen from the top of a stupid tree and caught on all the branches on the way down. Despite my doubts, I agreed to the meeting. I didn't see the need for James to be present, but I didn't want to offend him and decided to agree. I came to the meeting early so I could talk to my lawyer. Unfortunately, she did not advise anything except to let the other side speak first in order to understand their point of view, so we could negotiate from a position of strength. Kate seemed uncomfortable and avoided eye contact while James remained unwavering and sincere despite the difficult situation. I warmly welcomed James and expressed my joy at meeting him. On the other hand, I didn't like Kate's lawyer right away. As soon as he was introduced to me and shook my hand, he immediately got down to business. "So, Jim, let's get this nonsense sorted out and reunite the two of you," he said confidently. I looked at him sternly, meeting his gaze and squeezing his hand tightly. "That's not going to happen, Gibson," I replied, using his last name. "I've never met you before, but I've heard about your courtship of my wife. Let's keep it official. Call me Mr. Wilson." I let go of his hand and he nodded in understanding. Turning to my lawyer, I said, "Mrs. Wilson, please tell me why you asked for this meeting. The terms of the divorce are fair, and your husband does not want to reconcile with you because of your betrayal as a result of adultery. This situation is one of the most shocking cases of betrayal that I can remember." Gibson interjected, "No, Gibson, it was an honest statement of facts. Are you here to help or just to waste time?" Kate found her voice and said politely, "Please, everyone, I can speak for myself. I asked for this meeting because I don't want to get divorced. Despite my actions, I still love my husband. Please, Jim, sit down and talk to me so I can explain myself," Kate begged. Just when I was about to lose my temper, James intervened. "Jim, please talk to her," he said. "You two need to talk in private. I promise I won't interfere anymore." James and his wife Martha have always been kind to me, so I agreed to meet Kate out of respect for her parents. Just one meeting, I told James, and that would be the end of it. I completely lost respect for Kate. My lawyer said, "You shouldn't have any problems meeting, considering that you're still married. I suggest we discuss all issues related to the divorce application so that we are on equal terms if your conversation does not go according to plan." "Are there any objections to the terms of the divorce?" my lawyer asked. "My client considers the terms reasonable, but if necessary, she can seek advice from a court-appointed lawyer," Gibson replied. "I see. Thank you for raising this issue," my lawyer said. "Our meeting will end if there are no objections to the terms discussed." My lawyer concluded the conversation. As I was leaving the office, Kate and her father came up to me. James once again expressed his gratitude. I sincerely admire him. He was a wonderful father-in-law. His every look seemed to express an apology for his daughter's actions. I shook his hand again and suggested that Kate call at 5 o'clock the next evening. I informed her that all her things were packed and ready for her father to bring them if she so wished. At 5 o'clock the next evening, Kate's doorbell rang. Her father stayed in the car. According to the rules of decency, I should have invited him inside and offered him a beer, but I knew this conversation needed to remain just between Kate and me, without outside interference. I offered to sit at the dining table, the most formal setting in the house, to eliminate the possibility of misunderstandings. It was a business meeting, and I didn't want to compromise my position. Kate seemed nervous, perhaps realizing that nothing good would come of this situation. I made it clear that her actions were unforgivable and I was not going to back down. Strangely enough, she had a glimmer of hope that she could redeem herself, even after repeatedly betraying me along with my closest friend and business partner. Even thinking about forgiveness for such betrayal was unthinkable, but I promised James that I would at least listen to her. "What do you have to say for yourself, Kate?" I asked. "That I love you. That I was in a dark place," she admitted. She talked about her disdain for work, her dislike of the lawyer who handled our divorce, and her guilt for neglecting our relationship while I worked tirelessly to achieve our common goal of starting a family. She confessed that she felt lost and detached, barely noticing me in the midst of her own difficulties. I broke my word and did what I promised not to do. "Is it my fault that you fell and ended up on Matt's lap? Are you mad at me for this, Kate?" "Because I don't believe this explanation," I asked. "No, Jim, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to explain that I was depressed. I went to Dr. Sharp for help, and he prescribed me antidepressants, but I couldn't bring myself to take them. It was humiliating for me to feel like I needed medication when I had a good marriage and a promising future ahead of me. I wanted to start a family, but you said we couldn't," Kate tried to justify herself. "All I saw was a job that I despised and no sign of the family we were talking about starting. Jim, you know how much I wanted this and how hard it was for me to wait. I was so offended by your persistence in waiting. Everything I said was true. I, like you, desperately wanted to have a family, but the time just wasn't right for that. And then one evening, Matt called. When I told him that you were working late again, he was surprised. He said you never worked late," she said. It struck me. Are you just making up excuses to stay late at work? Maybe you were seeing someone else instead of being at home with me. The severity of my thoughts added to the already existing depression, making it even more severe. Jim, I couldn't hold back the tears, and Matt was there to comfort me like the big brother he always was. But in a moment of vulnerability, I reached out and kissed him. It was a mistake, Jim. I let my emotions get the better of me in response to his kindness. It was my mistake. It seemed to me that he reciprocated my feelings, she said, crying. I craved affection, and everything went into a spiral. This shouldn't have happened. We tried to end it twice. We both knew we couldn't hurt you that much, but my emotions overwhelmed me. Depression consumed me, and I sought solace. That Saturday, you came home early in the morning and found us just talking. I was in tears, that was all. We knew it had to stop. We decided to end it. But then you walked in, and everything collapsed. Jim, I understand the pain Matt and I have caused you, but you have to understand, she sobbed. We don't love each other, but you are very dear to us. We can't change the past, but we both beg you to change your mind and give us another chance, she concluded. I stared at her, not understanding how she believed her words could change my mind. There was no conviction in her eyes, and her plea seemed empty to me. She needed my best friend's attention just to take her mind off her despair. That was the reality of her request. I couldn't understand why she believed in the possibility of reconciliation. Kate, your expression of love for me is very strange. Your excuses do nothing to ease the pain of your betrayal. Both you and your lover are deceitful and despicable. I have no desire to keep in touch with you. Despite my hopes that you would say something redemptive, you turned out to be nothing more than an unfaithful scumbag. I don't want to expose myself to your deception anymore. Please sign the divorce papers so that we can move on. I will never forgive you, I replied. I'm sorry, but it seems you don't understand the seriousness of cheating with my best friend. It's over between us. There's no way back, Kate. I never thought I could stop loving you, but you proved me wrong. Now I feel nothing but disgust for you. You make me sick. I will never be able to remember with love the time we spent together. When I took her to the door, she was crying uncontrollably. I looked at her father and shook my head sadly. He nodded understandingly, got out of the car, and gently hugged her. He whispered, "Oh, Kate, what a nuisance," and then walked her to her car. He accompanied me to collect Kate's remaining belongings and load them into the car while she sat and cried. Then he cut her out of my life. James and I shook hands once more, this time for the last time. To be honest, saying goodbye to this respectable man left a heavier lump in my throat than parting with his daughter. I admired the way he supported her, but at the same time, I recognized the inevitability of circumstances. A decent man who raised his daughter in the spirit of morality now faced the consequences of her actions. It was time to confront Matt. In the middle of the 30-day deadline, Matt called me. I hesitated whether to talk to him, but both of us, as well as 6 other people, had invested money in the business and had to resolve the situation. Matt, what do you want? If it's not about selling the business, I'm hanging up. Relax, Jim, it's about business. I talked to the bank. How much do you want for your share? $200,000, I replied. What? You only paid $100,000. Let's be reasonable, Jim. I can't afford it. My finances are tight right now. Things are going well, but I don't have the money to pay for it, he replied indignantly. Matt, you can't just use the cash flow to buy a business. You have to raise capital yourself. If you buy a business, it won't sustain itself. By selling it to Coopers, you're actually doing yourself a favor because you're just burying it in the ground. I've been trying to explain this to you, Jim. We need your support for the sake of the 5 employees who rely on us. I'm truly sorry about what happened, but we need your help. Otherwise, we won't survive, Matt said bitterly. I chuckled at the thought. That's exactly what I was hoping for from my former best friend. Cooper offered me $200,000, but if you can outbid that amount, I won't even go to them for a counteroffer. It's not for you, just so you know. I want you to fail, but I care about the future of the other guys. I'm done talking. A week later, he called me again. Please, Jim, I only have $180,000. Could you keep a small share for yourself? I hung up the phone again. When the deadline came, Matt called again. Okay, I'll give you $200,000, he said. I ended the conversation in disappointment. What the hell, dude? I've met your asking price of $200,000. Why did you hang up on me? Matt asked angrily. I specifically told you that Cooper made an offer and you have to outbid him. Make a decision, or I'll sell to Cooper, I insisted. Jim, please, just tell me what I have to do. I can't raise any more money, Matt pleaded. $205,000, and it's yours. Do you want it or not? This was the last sentence I said. Great, that's settled, Matt hastily agreed. I hung up feeling defeated. On the appointed day, my lawyer Carl confirmed that the funds had been transferred. I was finished. There was nothing holding me back anymore. Having completed all my business after the divorce, I planned to start my life with a clean slate somewhere else. With my plumbing skills, I knew I would always have a job. It took several months before I was scheduled for a divorce hearing, and I hoped that everything would go smoothly and I would be able to get through this chapter of my life. But things went wrong when Kate's lawyer demanded a consultation before the divorce was finalized. It seemed that my plans to start life anew were being postponed again. I can't believe it, I exclaimed. The judge immediately silenced me by making a remark. Mr. Wilson, you will not use such expressions in my court. I will consider the reasons for the consultation. I quickly apologized, and my lawyer Karen King stood up to speak on my behalf. Your Honor, counseling will not help in this situation because my client has experienced a serious betrayal. His wife has been having an affair for more than 2 months, and he has no intention of reconciling with her. Forgiveness is not an option in this case. Forget about attempts at reconciliation. Consultations will become a meaningless activity. Mr. Gibson, why does your client think I should schedule a consultation? The judge asked. Gibson rose from his seat. Your Honor, Mrs. Wilson would like to speak with you directly if possible. Very good. Mrs. Wilson, you can continue. What do you hope to achieve through consultations? Kate rose, looking frail and unhealthy. It had been several months since I had last seen her, and she seemed to be just a shell of the woman I once knew and loved. Your Honor, I have made a serious mistake towards my husband, and I am fully aware of it. I will forever regret whatever happens today. I know that now he thinks he despises me, and it's a heavy burden mentally and physically. I feel like I'm falling apart despite taking antidepressants. They don't seem to ease my pain. All I really want is for my husband to love me again. Without his love, I am lost. At the time of my transgression, I was deeply depressed. My thoughts were clouded and my emotions were in turmoil, but now I've sunk even lower than I thought. Life seems unbearable, Your Honor. Please take this into consideration, Kate said sadly. I'm asking you to give me the opportunity to show him how much I love him. From the moment I met him, all I wanted to do was be with him, start a family with him, and spend the rest of my days with him. Your Honor, please give me a chance to prove my love for him. The judge listened attentively to her request, recognizing sincerity and remorse in her words. Mrs. Wilson, I hear a lot of words in this courtroom, and it's my duty to determine their sincerity. Your sincere request has not gone unnoticed, and I sympathize with your situation. I have to determine if counseling can have a beneficial effect on a marriage. Mrs. Wilson, in order to make any progress, both partners must be willing to participate. Unfortunately, I don't see any signs that your husband is ready for a change. Mr. Wilson, would you like to try to see a psychologist? The judge asked. Your Honor, with all due respect, I have to decline. I have no desire to visit a psychologist or work on reconciliation with Kate. In fact, I would rather get a prison sentence than participate in such events. The situation has escalated too much, Your Honor. I was a little hurt by Kate's words today. I began to answer. The betrayal was unforgivable. It haunts me, not even allowing me to think about reconciling with her, I replied. When I listened to Mr. Wilson's story, it became clear to me that it was a heartbreaking situation. Mrs. Wilson's love for her husband was obvious, but it wasn't enough to repair the damage. I decided to grant a divorce without consulting, believing that this was the best course of action, the judge replied. But just 3 weeks later, tragedy struck. James called me in a panic and asked me to come to the hospital. Confused and worried, I asked him what had happened. "Jim, please," he said, his voice trembling. "It's Kate. She's asking you to meet her." "I'll be there, James," I replied. I went to the hospital and asked where Kate was. They asked if I was a relative, and I explained that despite our recent divorce, she had asked to meet with me. Eventually, James came and found me. "Jim, I don't know how to tell you this, so I'll just tell you. Jim, she's pregnant, but she's in danger of losing the baby in her own life. She didn't take care of herself. She is the first pregnant woman I know who lost weight during pregnancy. I'm afraid it's going to end soon, Jim. She wants to talk to you," her father asked. When she was rushed to the emergency room, she seemed to be in serious condition, barely aware of her surroundings. But when I took her hand, she said with a heavy heart, "I'm sorry, Jim. I tried my best to keep our child alive. Despite all my efforts, my body failed me. I never wanted to harm our child. I didn't know about my pregnancy when I made the decision to deprive myself of nutrition. I sincerely regret the undesirable consequences for our child." The suffering in her eyes was obvious when she said those words. It was obvious that she knew that I was considering having a child with Matt. Then, unexpectedly for me, she turned to me and said, "Jim, the baby's yours. I made sure that he used protection every time." Her words stunned me, and tears flowed down my cheeks. Despite my attempts to bury my feelings for her, it seems I haven't quite succeeded. This revelation changed everything. Would any of them be able to survive this ordeal? I knew that if not, it wouldn't change anything in the end. When the device next to her began to sound alarms, I was taken out of the room while doctors rushed to her aid. James was sitting outside, and his appearance showed how much recent events had affected him in a short period of time. He seemed to have aged a lot since our last meeting at the courthouse. The word exhausted came to mind after listening to the hard news that was told to him. He felt regret. The realization was a heavy blow to him, and he couldn't shake the guilt of not contacting me sooner. It took him a lot of work to convince Kate to take care of herself, and her actions disappointed him. He was deeply disappointed with Kate's behavior toward me, but she lost interest in life. It looked like she gave up. "Jim, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just trying to explain the situation. I feel stuck between a rock and a hard place. To be honest, I'm on the verge of breaking down, and now this." I patted James's hand lightly. He was a good man who found himself in a difficult situation because of the actions of others and tried his best to do what was right for everyone. Even if he made mistakes, his intentions were pure. My heart ached for him. We sat together for 3 or 4 hours. The doctor came up and asked about the next of kin. James replied that it was possible to talk to him and others present at the same time. The doctor then explained the situation, stating that the critical situation had passed, but the mother and child were still in critical condition. He expressed concern for the mother's health and noted that the child might have health problems if he lives to term. The doctor confirmed that over the next few days, Kate would be monitored, with a focus on improving her health to better support the pregnancy. "I'm sorry, but I have to ask, how did she become so exhausted?" the doctor asked. James spoke in detail about the breakup and divorce, Kate's lack of motivation, and then the shocking discovery of her pregnancy. "So, you must be the father of the child," the doctor said, looking at me. "It looks like it, doctor, but I only found out about it a few hours ago," I replied. "If the child survives, I will ask for a DNA test, and if it turns out that he is mine, I will do my best to support him." I turned to James and said, "I'm so sorry, James. I will always support our child, but I cannot reconcile with Kate. The pain is too much to bear. Sir, I may not have the right to say this as a doctor, but I have to inform you. Judging by the condition of your ex-wife and the information shared by her father, it would not be surprising if, in a year, you find yourself a single parent, the doctor told us. I sank into a chair, feeling a mixture of disappointment and guilt as the doctor's words came crashing down on me. A feeling of horror gripped me as I realized the consequences of what he was hinting at. Everyone seemed to be pushing me to reconcile with Kate, but deep down, I knew it was the wrong decision for me. I was silent, thinking about the news. She was 6 months pregnant, but she had almost no visible signs of an infant bump. I couldn't help but feel sorry for the child who must be struggling inside her. A thought flashed through my head, maybe this is my child. It was definitely possible, given the frequency of our intimate encounters. It seemed plausible that I could be the father despite the vagueness of whether Kate used birth control with her boyfriend, Matt. The question kept running through my head, if this child is really mine, can I just leave? And do I even need to? What kind of connection could I establish with the child's mother at this moment when it seemed to me that I had solved my problems and was ready to leave the city? Life was becoming more and more difficult. Fortunately, both mother and child were able to survive thanks to qualified medical care. As soon as pregnancy complications were managed, despite the baby being born weighing just over 2 kilograms, he was surprisingly healthy, suggesting that even low-weight babies can grow and develop well under close supervision. Kate gained weight and came out of the pregnancy relatively unscathed, although she worried about the possible harm she could have done to herself and her future fertility. Unfortunately, the DNA test showed that I am the father of the child, which I had feared since learning about this possibility 3 months earlier. Although I had always believed that fatherhood would bring me great joy, the reality turned out to be far from ideal. It seemed that now I would be tied to a woman I could no longer stand, which in the long run would lead to lifelong involvement that I considered unbearable. Nothing had changed. I had no desire to look at her again, just as I didn't want her to die when the opportunity presented itself. It was 3 or 4 days after the birth when James contacted me again. "Jim, I'm calling about the baby," he said. "Kate wants to know if you would like to participate in choosing a name for the boy." "James, I didn't even think about it. We're not together anymore." "I didn't expect to be involved in decision-making," I replied. "But I asked that she not use my last name. Maybe she could use yours, Kelly. Does that seem fair to you?" "Jim, I'm really sorry," James said. "I think you need to talk to her. She still uses the name Kate Wilson, which can lead to confusion for the child if he is called differently by both mother and father. Besides, don't you miss your son, Jim?" After some hesitation, I realized that this was a necessary step. "Will Martha be with you too, James?" I asked. "Yes, she will," he replied. "Okay, then I'll come over after dinner tonight. How about 7 o'clock in the evening?" I suggested. "Great. See you later, Jim," my father-in-law said happily. I drove up to James's house at exactly 7 o'clock in the evening, and he welcomed me cordially. It had been quite a while since I last saw Martha. She looked tired and aged, as did James, 2 kind people who found themselves in a difficult situation. Martha hugged me and said softly, "That's not how we raised her, Jim." Then they left, leaving me with Kate and the baby. "Hello, Jim. Thank you for coming. Do you want to hold the baby?" Kate asked. The child was not to blame. I picked him up and looked into his innocent face. It was a mistake. At that moment, I realized what emotions overwhelm parents when they pick up their child. It was hard for me to breathe, emotions overwhelmed me. His eyes met mine, and I saw a mixture of emotions in them. There was a sense of familiarity, a need for protection, and something else that I couldn't identify. I was drawn into his gaze, unable to take my eyes off him. A smile played at the corners of my lips, but I was overwhelmed by a wave of uncertainty. Was this really what she had wanted all this time? Despite my doubts, he returned my smile, and his expression was very sweet. I couldn't disagree with her opinion of him, he was undeniably sweet. But as soon as I nodded in agreement, I was overcome with sadness. Why did it have to be this way, Kate? We could be so happy together, making our dreams come true, I asked bitterly. The tears in her eyes reflected the pain in my heart. Why did you ruin what could have been the best days of our lives, Jim? We can still do this. Can't you find the strength in your heart to forgive me? I was very ill and made terrible decisions. Please, Jim, please try, Kate begged. I tried to give it back to her, wanted to leave and never come back, but she refused to accept it. Kate, take your son, damn it. I need to leave, I replied rudely. I was on the verge of a panic attack. No, Jim, we need to talk. At least the boy needs to be given a name. You are not a coward, you've never backed away from anything. Please, talk to me. We have to figure everything out for his sake and for our own sake, she pleaded. I sat down on a chair, hugging my son. The task ahead seemed overwhelming, lost and not knowing what to do. I couldn't accept that I would leave him. Looking into his innocent eyes, I said, James Kelly Wilson, how do you like it? I asked softly. A smile appeared on her lips, and she agreed, calling her son the two best men in her life. I almost asked if she preferred the name Matt, but decided against it. Kate, I have a dilemma. I want to be with him, but I can't forgive you for what you did, no matter the circumstances. Did you really do that? I can't live like this anymore. I can't be with you if I don't love you. We need to find a way to move on. I will always support my son, but our relationship is over, I said sadly. I had already sold my share in the business and was about to leave town, but the appearance of my son made me change my mind. I decided to stay for now. Despite having some money left after paying off the loan and withdrawing my parents' guarantee, I realized that I needed to find a job. Since plumbing was my only skill, I decided to start my own business as an individual entrepreneur. I had my trusty truck from J&M Plumbing, and a friend helped me change the nameplate to reflect the new name of my business, Jim Wilson Plumbing. I took a bit of a risk by posting a bold ad addressed to Matt, the former managing partner of J&M Plumbing. I decided that if he didn't like it, he could try to sue me, if of course, he had the money for it. Fortunately, nothing worked out, and word of my services spread quickly. Soon, I had as much work as I could handle. In addition to developing the business, I also took care of drawing up a maintenance plan for my son, James, and his mother, Kate. Although there was no court decision on this issue, I wanted to do the right thing for my son and came up with an amount that I considered fair. Fortunately, Kate didn't resist, and I was able to provide for my son by running my successful plumbing business. Without her knowledge, I also created a college fund for my son. If he follows in his father's footsteps and decides not to pursue higher education, he will receive these funds on his 25th birthday. Although everything seemed to be going smoothly, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was just stalling for time without having a clear direction. I had intentions of starting over, including the desire to find a new partner with whom I could share my life, but this task turned out to be more difficult than expected, especially in our small town, where my past was well known. As a result, I felt frustrated and stuck in a routine, spending my days working and waiting for a change. I made an appointment with my child, James. My former father-in-law continued to act as an intermediary and was often present when I picked up my son. I expressed a desire to minimize contact with Kate and had no intention of forgiving her or rebuilding the relationship. A few months later, James informed me that Kate was still experiencing mental difficulties, combining work and childcare, and hadn't been seeing anyone since our breakup. She showed no interest and rejected all advances, even from Matt, which surprised me. I thought they might have a future together, even though Matt claimed he wasn't interested in her. Perhaps he only wanted a casual relationship that didn't require emotional attachment. I even thought about trying to prove that she was an unfit mother and demanding full custody. Would I be able to handle a full-time job as a single parent at this stage of my life? Probably not, but what other choice did I have? I had to make sure that she was healthy and capable of being a good mother to our child. It seemed impossible if I didn't communicate with her more than I was comfortable with, given that she cheated on me. Forgive and forget? Unlikely. Could I, a man who has always been firm in my judgments, now falter? I never thought it was possible, but life can bring us unexpected surprises. The bad news seems to come all at once. James mentioned that Kate is having a hard time right now, and now I found out that James himself has suffered a minor stroke. It was a wake-up call, but not too harsh, just a gentle reminder that the guy needed to slow down and calm down. Martha took her daughter's betrayal hard, and James was the one who picked up the pieces, taking care of both her and the child. As for me, she may not be my wife anymore, but he's still my son. It's time for me to step in and help in some way. So, we gathered for an informal family meeting, and it was decided that everyone except James should take on more responsibility. Kate had to constantly take medication and fulfill her duties as a mother. I knew I had to give her a lot of support, as James was doing most of the hard work. Martha also had to step in and help her husband, otherwise, she risked losing him to an early death. I didn't like the idea of spending more time with Kate, it infuriated me. But as a father, I had to step forward, not just be present when it was convenient for me. To make it all work, I decided to give Kate some leeway to simplify her life and, in turn, make it easier to care for our son. I started bringing ready-made food to their house twice a week and spending the evening with them, leaving after the child went to bed. On weekends, I cooked simple homemade food. I may not have been a skilled cook, but at least no one got poisoned from me. Surprisingly, my meatloaf wasn't terrible. As a result, I started talking to Kate more often than in the last year. When things were going up, our conversation started awkwardly and briefly, but gradually became more frequent over time. Our conversations became more friendly and focused on our common child. As we became more at ease with each other, it became increasingly difficult for me to contain my hostility towards her. Although I would not say that I began to like her, I realized that showing empathy for someone is not as difficult as I thought. I took it upon myself to make sure that she continued to take her medication, and gradually she began to come out of her recent slump. It became clear to me and to everyone else what medications she needed. Just a few of my smiles and kind words changed her worldview. She suffered from a lack of affection, felt like an outcast, as a result of which her self-esteem suffered. The quality time the whole family spent with our son quickly lifted her spirits. It made me wonder if I treated the woman I loved with all my heart the way she deserved. Despite the pain she caused me by breaking my heart with a 2-month affair, I wondered if exile was really the right reaction to a mistake. Can I be a more noble person? Do I really want to humiliate a woman who was once dear to me, and now we have a child? After reflecting on my actions, I realized that I might have gone too far in my quest for revenge. Even though she hurt me, I've already hurt her. I have repeatedly used physical force on my former friend. I created financial difficulties for him by threatening to sell our company to a competitor. I also opened a new business and stole clients from it. He had already suffered for his actions, but I was still thinking about making him suffer even more. Instead of focusing on the thirst for revenge, I should strive to become a better person. Is it fair that her punishment is much more severe than his? We were married once, but that's not the case anymore. She had to move in with her parents, she's stuck at a job she despises, and there's no end in sight. She has lost the love she once considered the only one and desired, and now lives a lonely life. We all suffered, Kate, Matt, and I, when our once close, friendly trio was irreparably torn apart. There are no winners in this situation. Matt has become unimportant in my life. I was thinking the same thing about Kate until the unexpected arrival of the baby complicated the situation. I wanted to take revenge on both of them, but I doubted it would be enough. There was a time when I thought it would only happen when hell freezes over, but now I doubted it. I had a son who was innocent of all this. I had to step up and become a father to him. His mother struggled with depression after her affair and our divorce, especially after a dangerous pregnancy. The doctor's words echoed in my head, spoken not as a doctor but as a person. He warned me that I could soon become a single parent if I didn't take steps to help Kate, who was on a dangerous path of self-destruction. And even worse, my ex-father-in-law James, a man I greatly admired, almost sacrificed his own health trying to solve other people's problems. It became clear that it was time for me to step in and take control of the situation. I needed to talk to Kate to make sure she fully understood my offer. The following Saturday, I arrived at James and Martha's house earlier than usual. It was important for me to talk to Kate alone before introducing my usual calm demeanor to everyone. Kate, I began. I have thought about our current situation, and I believe that what we are doing is not giving James the best opportunity to recover. To be honest, he doesn't need any extra stress from the fact that you and your child live under his roof, and I'm here 3 nights a week. So, I developed a plan. I think you and the child should move in with me to live together. I see that you are smiling, but I want to make it clear that this will be a purely platonic agreement. I haven't forgotten or forgiven what you and Matt did to me. I'm trying to make the most of our new situation, but that doesn't mean I've moved on from the past. This offer comes from a sense of care and respect for your father, who has always been kind to me, I suggested. Although I understand that such an agreement may not be ideal for you, I believe that it will ultimately be useful for childcare. I understand that you may need help with medication management, and I am ready to fulfill this role for the sake of our son. But if you decide to continue a relationship with another man, this agreement will no longer be valid. I'm not going to act as a babysitter while you're doing other things. Can you agree to these terms? I asked. Kate's smile never left her face, and she replied, "Yes, Jim, I am ready to agree to anything just to be with you and the child. I understand and respect the boundaries that you have set. I will follow your wishes, but I must admit that I will continue to try to regain your interest. Our relationship may be platonic, but I will still strive to be a good partner for you without crossing any boundaries unless you decide otherwise. If you ever change your mind, I'll be ready and willing. If not, I will accept any dynamic of our relationship," Kate replied. Eventually, we found an apartment, and the 3 of us settled in, creating a tense atmosphere. 2 people who were once connected by deep love found themselves in an unusual situation. Although Kate claimed that we still have feelings, we are now living together in celibacy. For me, raising my son was a mixture of joy and struggle. Outside of work, the child took up all my time from wake to sleep. Fortunately, despite the complications during pregnancy, the child was obedient. He quickly grew to the ideal weight for his age and slept soundly for 8 to 9 hours every night. He was the embodiment of childhood dreams, full of energy and curiosity. He started walking at just 10 months old, and by 14 months, he was already speaking a few words. Despite my distrust and hostility towards Kate, our home life seemed idyllic to outsiders, presenting us as a happy couple in our spacious 3-bedroom house. Each family member had their own private space, and the adults used it to hide from the frustrations associated with their celibate relationship. I admitted that I didn't have to be celibate for Kate's sake, but for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to pursue someone else. I decided that if I had a relationship, whether short-term or long-term, I would keep it separate from my home life. When Kate stopped needing my constant care, I felt like I was finally returning to my old self, the reliable and supportive person my family had always known. Martha also seemed to be coming out of her depression, showing signs of improving her relationship with Kate. Naturally, over time, the instability of our position became apparent. The facade of 2 people in their early 20s living a celibate life was about to collapse. Kate broke down first. She craved physical intimacy with a man. I became more and more tense and detached. The artificial, sterile environment that we created affected us. Realizing the tension was building between us, Kate finally decided to meet me face to face. "I know you as well as I know myself, and the fact that you're so upset scares me. I'm afraid of how this might affect our relationship. The last 9 months have brought me great relief. I can live with you again, but the lack of physical intimacy drives me crazy with desire. If you lose control, I'm afraid I won't be able to handle it without you," she said. I admitted that she was right, but I wasn't ready to admit it. I took the keys and said I'd be back later in the month. Since we moved into this house, I left for the first time before my son fell asleep, a clear sign that the tension had reached its limit. Without hesitation, I headed to the bar, a familiar place where I usually spent time with Matt. It's been almost a year since we last spoke. I hoped it would be many more years before I would see my former best friend again, but I was wrong. It wasn't the place I was supposed to be. As soon as I got to the bar, I saw Matt's reflection in the mirror behind the counter. When Matt came up to me, I realized it was too late to leave. "Can I buy you a drink, stranger?" Matt asked, holding out his hand to shake. It was obvious that Matt was trying to make amends. I didn't want to agree. "Get out of my sight, traitor," I hissed. "Come on, man, leave it alone." I have apologized countless times for my mistakes. I was a fool, and I was wrong. I'm really sorry, Jim. Please, let's have a drink together. I heard that you and Kate are back together, and you have a baby now. I am very glad to hear the good news. Congratulations, he said happily. As for you, Matt, I have no kind words. We can live under the same roof, but that doesn't mean we're a couple again. Thanks to you, this will never happen. We may have a son together, but that's where our relationship ends. We are not married and will never get married again because of your actions. I doubted your intentions towards my wife, but soon realized that you were just a coward, not capable of a real relationship, I said. Jim, when you left her, I tried to resume our relationship. I was ready to dedicate a long life to her because she was worth it. But you know what? She confessed to me that it is with you that she imagines the future. Obviously, you understood this, but you decided to abruptly end the relationship anyway, Matt replied. We exchanged rude words, and I expressed my contempt for her, but Jim, she only has feelings for you. If you could soften your behavior, you would find a woman who admits her mistakes and is ready to never repeat them. I may be the worst best friend in history, but after so many years of friendship, I'm pursuing your interests. Kate is the embodiment of something that can bring great joy into your life. I understand if my words make you angry and if you feel the need for physical retribution. I will accept it. Matt said, this time, I will not take revenge as in all previous ones. I will accept whatever you choose. I've hurt you enough for the rest of your life, and I swear I'll never hurt you again, Matt finished. Sometimes you hear something from someone and realize that it's true. This moment was one of those. It wasn't enough to restore a broken friendship, but it had a deep resonance for me. Every word I said was true, and I realized that I had already taken revenge on Matt. With a solemn nod to Matt, I turned and left the bar, heading home. I whispered Kate's name, but she didn't answer. Trying not to disturb the baby, I gently knocked on the closed door of her bedroom, but received no answer. With a feeling of anxiety, I quietly entered the room and saw that she was crying softly. It was obvious that she was scared by the events that had forced me to leave earlier. I undressed and climbed into bed, where I found Kate undressed. Pulling her to me, I kissed her gently. She moaned in response, allowing me to explore her body as I continued to kiss her. Pausing for a moment, I lifted her chin and said the words that will forever remain in her memory, if you dare to do this again, I swear I will destroy you. As I approached her, Kate begged, never, I promise, never again. I love you. It's hard to imagine how quickly my life turned into a nightmare in just 4 years. My wife started working at Gilbert Endeavors where our children were in their teens and eager to leave their home nest. The idea of working as a level secretary seemed ideal to Sarah. My name is Skip Trexler, although my last name is Austin, I've always been called Skip. I was a slim guy of average height and weighed less than 140 pounds when I graduated from high school. I wasn't interested in sports, especially competitive ones. The only sporting activity that I liked was long-range shooting. From high school to college, I devoted most of my free time to shooting and reloading. After 8 years of training, I was able to consistently hit a 2-inch target at 100 yards. My favorite weapon was the Marlin .336 with its own caliber cartridge. This cartridge has been discontinued for several years, but I managed to create my own version using 30 to 30 cartridges with the neck pointing downwards. The success of this project brought me a sense of satisfaction that I had been waiting for so long. 2 important events happened during my student years. I met my wife Sarah and my future business partner Chuck Fuller. Life was a bit routine. I got a degree in geology, got married, and started a small surveying business with Chuck. Chuck and I didn't work for anyone else after college. We raised $25,000 each and founded our own surveying company, which was engaged in small projects and large real estate transactions. Although we didn't earn a lot of money, we were satisfied with our work. Chuck married a local girl shortly after Sarah and I tied the knot. My family owned a bungalow in Shoal Hill County, located on 160 acres of land, where we often gathered for family holidays when I was younger. The Fullers had a cabin on 640 acres in Potter County, where Chuck and his family went hunting, but they didn't use it for anything else. That's all I can say at the moment. My life changed for the worse about 4 years ago. Gilbert Endeavors was engaged in the production of trainers. Its headquarters were located in the area, and production plants and distribution centers were located throughout the country. My wife Sarah got a job there and was working there when our twin daughters Marcy and Mercy were born. Even though I had just started high school, it all seemed like a great opportunity. The opening hours were convenient, the salary was fair, and the location was suitable. Everything went smoothly for the first year until GE hired Terry Ulrich, a former NFL quarterback, as a marketing manager and company representative. Unfortunately, my wife worked in the same department for the next 6 months. We only heard about how amazing Terry Ulrich was. My wife and daughters were delighted with him. Fortunately, the craze eventually passed when my wife started working overtime. Chuck and I both grew up in the area, so it wasn't hard for us to find out that Sarah and Terry Ulrich were in a relationship. While their romance was blossoming, my marriage began to break down. Sarah and I were drifting apart, which affected my relationship with my daughters. I never told Sarah about it. When she began to travel frequently for work and promotion, I gradually became invisible. Although she sometimes invited me to parties and events with her, I often stayed alone for the rest of the evening. Intimacy became a distant memory. How to cope with such a lonely existence? Before Sarah started her career, our family life was typical. We spent weekends together and went on vacation with the whole family at least once a year. The girls attended ballet lessons and football matches, and Sarah took an active part in the work of the parent committee and scouts. The weekly tradition of pizza nights united the family. Although the girls did not like to spend time in the bungalow, now all the events are a thing of the past. In recent years, visiting conferences and meetings have appeared on Sarah's schedule, and the frequency of these events is steadily increasing. Recently, she began to take the girls with her on long trips. I have never been given the opportunity to attend classes or even express my interest in attending them. I often heard the girls talking enthusiastically about how much fun they had, but they never included me in their conversations. Knowing that I could hear, Terry Ulrich's name never came up, despite the fact that I was aware of his presence at every party. At the Gilberts' New Year's Eve party, it was hard for Sarah not to give me an invitation, but I didn't have the slightest desire to attend. The shame of having to deal with infidelity alone was already unbearable. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to keep my composure if things went awry. My fears were justified. The girls looked amazing, dressed up for the occasion. Marcy and Mercy were thrilled because it was their first adult party. I didn't have a tuxedo, so I put on my best suit. Upon arrival, we were greeted by a large crowd of people. Skip Trexler seemed pleased with the crowd. "Thank you for coming with your wife and beautiful daughters to our little meeting," Terry Ulrich said with a smile, squeezing my hand tightly. When he finally let me go, I saw that Sarah was grinning, and the girls were looking at me contemptuously and quickly leaving. It was the beginning of a difficult evening for me. I was sipping a beer in the corner, trying not to cause any more embarrassment to my family. I remained silent and inactive but still managed to spoil the beginning of the evening for them. Terry Ulrich was a big man, towering over me by at least a foot and weighing 100 pounds more, all muscle. He exuded confidence and charm, attracting the attention of my daughters while my wife stayed by his side for most of the evening, slightly holding his hand. Despite several attempts by others to engage me in conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that Terry's presence overshadowed me. Many middle and senior managers took notice of me, exchanging knowing glances and making subtle remarks to each other that seemed to be directed at my cuckold status. Although I couldn't hear their words, the subtext was obvious. Sipping ginger ale, which mysteriously replaced beer for me, I kept my composure, not letting their behavior unsettle me. The atmosphere at the party became more lively. People took to the dance floor, including my wife, who seemed to enjoy it. Ulrich and I spent the evening together, but for the last 3 hours, neither my wife nor the girls said a word to me. When a small group of men and women were chatting on the dance floor, one of the guys gestured at Sarah and Ulrich. When they noticed my gaze, they burst out laughing and quickly looked away. After a few minutes, they were still laughing, and I realized that my evening was over. I put down my glass and headed for the door, and then I saw Ulrich, who had his hands on my wife's back, and she was running her fingers through his hair. Without hesitation, she pulled him to her and kissed him passionately in the middle of the dance floor. In a split second, I crossed the room, spun Ulrich around, and hit him hard in the face. Pain shot through my arm, and the next moment, I woke up in the back seat of an ambulance. The emergency hospital was only a few minutes away, and when I was riding in the ambulance, I realized that I was the only passenger. Memories of being taken to the emergency room flashed through my head. When I finally came to my senses, I found myself in intensive care. Half an hour later, a doctor came to me and told me about my injuries. In addition to my broken arm, I had 3 broken ribs, a broken nose, 3 missing teeth, and my jaw was too loose. My jaw was fixed with a wire for support. My right kidney was damaged, and Terry Ulrich struck the last blow in the groin, damaging several blood vessels. The doctor informed me that I could be discharged in about 4 days, but I would have to spend at least 2 weeks in a rehabilitation center. They also offered me the option of undergoing rehabilitation at home, which I refused, preferring to stay in the clinic. By the time my wife and daughters arrived, it was already late in the evening. There was silence in the room, no one was talking. Clenching my jaw, I didn't dare to start a conversation. I was able to speak, but I didn't want to reveal it. "Well, Skip, what do you have to say for yourself?" From her behavior, I realized that I was not interested in entering into a discussion. Instead of answering, I just gestured at my tense jaw. We sat in silence for an eternity before she broke the silence by expressing her embarrassment. The girls were so upset that we had to leave the New Year's holiday ahead of time. The whole evening was ruined, and for what? I should have foreseen the difficulties associated with your appearance in public. I promised her that such an incident would not happen again. While she was talking, I sat in silence, unable even to smile. They stayed for a few more minutes and then got up to leave. Chuck arrived a couple of hours later, and we exchanged a few words. Yes, I could talk, but at that moment, I decided not to. When I picked up the local newspaper, I found myself on the front page. The headline read, "Local NFL hero saves a woman and her daughters from an abusive father." The article described how he intervened in a situation when a husband attacked his wife at a New Year's Eve party at Gilbert Endeavor. Terry Ulrich came to her rescue and restrained the attacker until help arrived. Although the events did not happen exactly as he remembered them, it was a story that the public would most likely accept. After this revelation, Chuck and I had a long conversation during which we discussed various possible options. After he left, I refused dinner and asked for sleeping pills as I needed a long rest. The next day was spent mainly in examinations and treatment of all detected injuries. Now all I had to do was wait and focus on getting better. One of the hospital staff provided me with a list of recommended rehabilitation centers in the area, and I chose one of them located near Hamburg. Chuck arrived later in the evening, and we sealed the deal with a handshake. Although I was still a co-owner, my share was now officially sold to him. We laughed at the steep price of $25,000 for 1 week of rehabilitation. Sarah and the girls never visited me in the hospital again. In the end, they returned the day after I moved to the rehab center, only to find out that they were not notified and were not allowed in when they tried to see me. They left in a state of anger and disappointment. When I entered the room, I was curious who was allowed to visit me. The orderly informed me that they were trying to set up an appointment for me. Laughter caused excruciating pain in the ribs. The most painful part of my injuries was dealing with my teeth. Fortunately, a paid dentist worked at the hospital, and I decided to use this service. The wound on my arm was not as serious as first thought. Despite the fact that I had the opportunity to leave the rehabilitation center earlier, I decided to extend my stay for 2 whole weeks. 10 days later, I finally felt like I could take a deep breath again. It was a relief. Sarah made no further attempts to visit me. The National CrossFit competition was held in Atlantic City on the second weekend of February. Sarah and her friends, as well as Terry Ulrich and the GE marketing team, attended the event. Chuck and a few of our colleagues spent the weekend transporting my clothes and personal belongings to a bungalow in Shoal Hill County. He made sure to take my Marlin and my reloading supplies. 2 days later, I was already settled in a new house. Chuck and his wife June came to visit that weekend. Sarah seemed to be looking for me in the office, she was worried about the lack of bank deposits in our joint account since the beginning of the year, and she wanted an explanation. Chuck spent 30 minutes trying to explain that I no longer owned shares in the company or even worked for it. Sarah left in despair. After a few weeks, I returned to my normal life. I diligently followed the treatment and exercise regimen Chuck entrusted me with. He provided me with a company truck and a credit card, as well as a significant amount of cash just in case. I left my phone with Chuck and settled into a cozy bungalow, realizing that it was temporary. I took leisurely walks and gradually started jogging. The next destination was Terry Ulrich's luxurious home on Dury Street, located outside the city on a winding road leading to Mount Penn. Due to the difficult terrain of the steep mountain slope, there were only a few houses in the area. Despite this, I had no trouble finding my home and discovered some great secluded spots with spectacular views. I worked out in the morning and kept fit. After lunch, I practiced target shooting, focusing on hitting inanimate targets according to my Bushnell laser rangefinder. I needed to accurately hit a distance of 133 yards. I stocked up on eggs for training and even bought a new silencer to improve my shooting. In the evenings, I devoted my time to planning, setting up, and recharging. I recently decided to grow a beard. Chuck visited me about once every 2 weeks, and Sarah made numerous attempts to find me at the office. After 2 months of unsuccessful attempts, Sarah finally gave up. Chuck brought several newspaper clippings with him during his visits. It became clear from them that my wife and daughters were still leading a luxurious lifestyle thanks to their new benefactor. He seemed to be fully supportive of them. As I didn't take any action, surprisingly, Sarah and the girls still lived in our old house, and this decision puzzled me. It was time to let them go and move forward. I began to return to the city in the mornings to observe Terry's house from a strategic point. I was surprised to learn that he was an avid swimmer and did 50 laps in his heated pool every morning. In search of a change of scenery, I decided to spend the weekend in Potter County. Moving from the bungalow to the hut was a refreshing change in the rhythm of life. Without electricity, running water, and a cell phone signal, I found myself in a remote place. The nearest Walmart store was a 45-minute drive away in Olean, New York, and I really didn't want to go there during the harsh winter months. To avoid possible inconveniences, I made sure to stock up on everything necessary to last at least 4 months. That way, I wouldn't have to run to the store at the last minute before being inundated with snow. Due to bad weather early Wednesday morning, I drove to the office and transferred all my stuff from the truck to my Subaru Outback. I left the company truck at a construction site located at the foot of the mountain and headed for a secluded vantage point. There wasn't a single car nearby at this time of day. After setting up the tripod, I prepared the weapon, 1 cartridge in the chamber, another in the tube, and 2 more cartridges at hand. 20 minutes later, Terry Ulrich appeared near the water to take a morning swim. I shot him several times and injured him in several places. Then I hurriedly gathered up my weapons and quietly left. 10 minutes later, I left the construction site without a trace. When I returned to the office, I found my Subaru waiting for me. Instead of returning to the bungalow, I went straight to Potter County. My first task was to clean the water source to provide myself with fresh water. Then I started collecting a good supply of firewood. Fortunately, the hut was well insulated and waterproof. I found that LED lamps are much more efficient and economical than old carbon oil lamps. After putting everything in order, I resumed shooting, this time at paper targets. It was only in the middle of the second week that I saw her for the first time, a slender, tall woman dressed in jeans, a flannel shirt, and a vest, walking along an old logging trail. Even from afar, the backpack draped over her shoulders could be seen. She was walking past an open area that served as a shooting range on a huge 640-acre plot where I lived a secluded existence. It made sense to build a shelter next to the road to have easy access to supplies. One day, taking advantage of the opportunity, I aimed at her. She had an elaborate crossbow slung over her shoulder, which made me curious about its purpose. Intrigued, I decided to take an old galvanized coffee pot and a portion of my delicious cookies with me for a small barbecue area around the campfire. It seemed to me that I had set up some kind of trap, and 3 days later, my suspicions were confirmed when she unexpectedly approached me. Confused, I looked at her with disbelief. Haltingly, she introduced herself as Claire and expressed hope for a conversation. I motioned for her to sit down and offered her coffee. She agreed with a smile and took the crossbow off her shoulder, then sat down. Introducing myself as Skip, I said that I had been in the area for about 2 weeks and had seen her nearby several times. Then I told her that I was staying in a cabin a mile away and had often been to this place. I offered her one of my famous cookies and asked her how long she was going to stay here. She replied that she would stay here until the end of the summer, while I planned to stay for at least 4 to 5 months. Noticing that she preferred cream and sugar in her coffee, I asked if she owned the plot, to which she replied that it belonged to a friend who had allowed her to use it. When asked if she hunts, she explained that she used to shoot but has not done so for several years, currently doing only target shooting. I hope I'm not interrupting, but is it okay if I use the archery range? I can't find a suitable place to train, she said in an accent I couldn't identify. It looked like it could be English, Australian, or Scottish, but I didn't want to ask. No, not at all. I'm sure we can find something that suits your needs. Feel free to use it whenever you want, I replied as she reached for a second cookie. Watching her eat it made me feel satisfied. I'm just curious, she added. I got the impression that compound bows are the norm these days, but you have a brand new recurve bow that really catches my attention. Believe me, his bow mastery is at the highest level, I said. Although she usually used ordinary arrows to practice targets, she always had 4 hunting arrows ready to be used on her bow. That evening, I drove a few miles down the road to pick up 3 bales of hay, which marked the beginning of my summer with Claire. Claire visited me every day and returned home every evening. The staff of the lodge installed a tracker on her mobile phone, thanks to which they always knew her location. When the second week began, we were hit by a summer squall. We took refuge on the porch of the cabin, joking about her predicament. Without saying a word, she called the cabin and informed them that she would not be able to return that evening due to the bad weather and found a place to stay. I was surprised and delighted by her resourcefulness. This case marked the transition from a platonic relationship with Claire Charles to a more intimate one. We began to alternate places to stay overnight, and Highlands Lodge stood out in Potter County for its luxury and high cost. Most of the guests were foreigners, including Claire's family from Cornwall. The cabin had a hot shower, plentiful food, and laundry services, and I liked it all. The closeness and the fresh air added an exciting element to our relationship. Having all the necessary resources certainly improved the experience. Over time, our visits to the shooting range became less frequent. One day, when Claire and I were having lunch, Chuck and June suddenly appeared. June was delighted to see that I had a life partner, and even more delighted to learn that this was a serious relationship. They kept a low profile at first, but eventually, June and Claire retreated to talk. After the unfortunate incident with Terry Ulrich, I turned out to be the main suspect. Terry quickly realized that the situation was much more serious than he had first thought. The media attention shifted from me to Terry, which led to even more trouble for him and my wife. As the investigation continued, the relationship between Terry and my wife came into focus. Just 3 weeks later, Terry left his post at Gilbert Endeavors. When police officers visited the bungalow in Schuylkill County, they found it abandoned. They had no credit card information, no incoming phone calls, no information about my location. Chuck was never questioned about the cabin. He mentioned that Sarah had visited the office several times, desperately trying to find me, as her source of income was dwindling. Chuck said that Terry had lost interest in Sarah and blamed her for his problems. I was at a loss for what to do next and couldn't bring myself to go back. Feeling trapped and having no alternatives, I felt the need to go on a quest. When the year came to an end, I found that I had become too comfortable. Even though I was happy with Claire, I realized that I was neglecting my own reality. It was a crisp autumn day, and I was sitting alone in the hut. Something was wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint the cause. As soon as I lit a fire and brewed coffee, the door suddenly opened. Terry Ulrich looked as big and unattractive as the last time I saw him. Standing in the doorway, he was grinning broadly and holding an old SWAT police pistol in his right hand. His posture seemed unstable, and his left arm was stretched out at an awkward angle, as if he was trying to keep his balance. Our eyes met, silently assessing each other. I was expecting a vindictive speech, but there was silence, and I just suggested coffee. You bastard. I spent over $10,000 to track you down. I'm not interested in coffee. So, what do you want? I'm watching you, you sneaky weasel, he shouted. As he spoke, his face became redder and redder, and he began to get furious. Suddenly, a look of shock appeared on his face. He dropped the gun and fell to one knee. Terry was lying on the floor, howling in pain. A crossbow bolt was sticking out of his left buttock. Claire watched from the doorway with a smile on her face. We rushed back to the Highlands, leaving everything in the cabin. Claire packed her things neatly into the rented Land Rover in 15 minutes, and we laughed throughout the process. After we relaxed a bit, we drove along the US 80 highway. The breakfast was just great. We ate well. I think he's already pulled out the arrow and gone to the hospital, I said. No, he needs to call 911 as soon as possible. He'll probably have to lie on his stomach on a gurney when he goes to the ambulance. The situation is definitely awkward, Miss Claire, I said, playfully waving a fork with scrambled eggs. After breakfast, I called Chuck while Claire made her own call. I brought Chuck up to speed, and he found it funny. I mentioned our intended destination, Ocala, Florida, where my grandparents lived, knowing that it was just a cover while I was on the phone. Cunningly, Claire pulled a wallet out of my pocket, then returned to her seat and continued the conversation while I bought treats for our trip. I had no idea where we were going, but I believed Claire had a plan. She didn't disclose any information, and I didn't ask for details. I was content with my ignorance and relied on her opinion. It was a tiring day, but eventually, we reached a charming hotel in the Wisconsin valleys. Exhausted by the journey, we quickly fell asleep. After 4 hours of driving, we arrived at the Dutch Walmart. Claire packed all her things, but I left empty-handed. I had no idea what she was thinking. She seemed to enjoy making me guess. I bought myself a new wardrobe, and Claire stocked up on snacks. Canoeing on the lakes was my childhood dream, and finally, I was able to make it come true. Upon our arrival, everything was perfectly organized, and the outfitter even took care of renting a car for Claire. This hint made me realize that we probably won't be coming back. It was exciting and exhilarating. I couldn't wait to find out what other surprises she had in store for me. Before I left, I made one last call to Chuck. Skip, what have you done? All I'm hearing about here is Ree's recent failure. It even made national headlines, damn it. Chuck exclaimed. I have no idea what you're talking about, I replied. June's laughter could be heard in the background. Well, his public persona is plummeting. It seems that every step he takes is a miss. It's hard to believe that this is happening to a man who is so loved. I've been wanting to say this for a long time, and Skip, I have to say that the divorce was the right decision. Sarah was stunned by this, and it was very hard for her. I don't know how you managed to fix it, but somehow you did it. She is lost and struggling, both emotionally and financially, Chuck explained. Chuck, you have to believe me. I honestly don't understand what you're talking about. I didn't even go to a lawyer. Are you sure about the divorce? I asked. Yes, today she was waving documents and launched into a tirade about it. It's nice to hear good news for once. By the way, could you stop by the house and ask someone to pack my things in the car? Chuck requested. No problem. Where are you now? I inquired. I'm in Moss Bluff, Florida. I'm looking for a trailer to rent, Chuck replied. Claire stood on the dock and waved at me as the canoe filled to capacity. I expressed gratitude to my parents for sending me to a Boy Scout camp as a child. Being in the canoe, I didn't feel like a complete fool. For 6 days, we swam around the lakes, camping in different places every evening. Claire expertly guided us using her mobile phone's GPS. I accompanied her and found the trip enjoyable. The culmination of the trip was an intimate moment under the night sky. The next day, our adventure continued when, at noon, we met a man at a secluded marina on a remote road. After hugging and talking in French, he handed Claire the truck keys and an impressive envelope. 30 minutes later, we unloaded our belongings from the canoe and set off. Peering out the rear window, I watched him pull away from the dock while I was driving. Claire started going through the contents of the envelope. "I guess I should call you Clinton now," she remarked, making me look at her in puzzlement. Grinning, she handed me a different named ID and a driver's license with my photo on it. The name on the driver's license belonged to Clinton Barfield. "You're kidding, right?" I asked incredulously. "No, you're officially Clinton Barfield now," she said with a proud smile, waving her new Canadian passport in my face. "Wait, are we in Canada now?" I asked in surprise. "Of course, silly," she replied. 4 days later, we landed in Nuuk, and 2 hours after that, we arrived at the CLA family home near Street Austell. Surprisingly, I felt at home, as if I always belonged here. Despite my initial misgivings, getting to know Claire's family turned out to be comfortable and enjoyable. A huge mansion towered in front of us. Its grandeur became apparent as soon as we entered it. My father invited me into his office, where a beautiful walnut gun cabinet stood against one wall. I watched curiously as he took a rifle out of the closet and handed it to me, a Marlin .336 with a cocked chamber. At that moment, I felt a sense of belonging, as if I had finally found my place. But Sarah and the girls disappeared from my life without a trace. Chuck and June, unaware of the truth, continued to receive mysterious Christmas cards from Mr. and Mrs. Clinton Barfield every year. They had no idea what secrets were hidden in these postcards. This year, our postcard will depict our family, my wife, our 3 children, and me. I have no doubt that Chuck will decipher the message. Does Terry Ulrich really exist? He probably never existed, at least for Sarah and her 2 daughters, and I'm glad these people are no longer in my life.